There's a name you still say sometimes without meaning to, a leash by the door you couldn't throw away, a patch of sun on the floor where they used to lie. You know the one. They were there through a season no one else saw you cry through. And when they were gone, the quiet in the house was the loudest thing you'd ever heard. So you've wondered, softly, when no one's around, was that just an animal? Or will you see them again someday? I've read this question in Scripture more carefully than I ever expected to, and what I found there, where Scripture pictures the world God promises to remake, went further than I expected. Give me the next few minutes and I'll show you exactly where, every place Scripture speaks of it in the text itself. Gently, honestly, and more than you were ever told. Here's something you may never have said out loud. When they were gone, part of you went looking for permission to grieve them the way you actually did. Because somewhere along the way, someone told you the rules. Maybe it was gentle, a well-meaning voice at church, or a line you read once and never forgot. They're just animals. Animals don't have souls. A believer shouldn't hold on so tightly to a creature. Save that kind of love for people, for God. And so you learn to grieve quietly, to apologize for the size of it, to feel a little foolish that a leash by the door could still take the wind out of you 3 years later. I want to be honest with you about where that idea comes from, because it didn't come from nowhere, and the people who taught it to you weren't cruel. They were reaching for two real things in Scripture. The first is the belief that a soul is what makes us human, the thing that separates us from every other living thing. And people will point you to Genesis, to the moment God forms the first man from the dust and breathes life into him, and he becomes a living soul. There it is, they say. That's the human thing, the soul. The second is a stranger, quieter passage. It's in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, the same book that gave us a time to be born and a time to die. And the writer, looking hard at death, says something almost shocking. He says that people and animals share the same breath, that as one dies, so dies the other, and that all of them go to the same place. All of them come from dust, and to dust they return. And then he asks the question no one wants to sit with. Who really knows whether the spirit of a man goes upward and the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth? Read quickly. Those two ideas seem to close the door. Humans are the soul bearers. Animals go down into the ground, and that's the end of the story. Grieve if you must, but don't hope. Here's what I need you to hear gently. That reading isn't the whole truth of what those passages say. It isn't even the most careful reading of them, because when you go back to Genesis, back to the 5th and 6th days before man is ever formed, and you look at the words the text actually uses for the creatures of the sea, and the birds of the air, and the animals of the field, you find something that stops most people cold the first time they see it. It's a single Hebrew phrase, the very same phrase that gets translated living soul, when it's used of the man in chapter 2, is used again and again of the animals in chapter 1. Same words, the same word for life. The line we've drawn so confidently between them and us. Scripture draws it far less sharply than we do. And Ecclesiastes? The writer isn't slamming a door. Look at how he says it. He doesn't declare that the animal simply ends. He asks a question. Who knows? And he leaves it open on purpose. That open question is not the same thing as a no. We turned his honest uncertainty into a hard rule he never actually stated. So before we go one step further, I want to lift something off of you. The love you had for them was not a mistake. It was not too much. And the ache you still carry is not a sign of weak faith. The God who counts the sparrows never once asked you to feel less. But if the door isn't as closed as we were told, if the same word for life covers them and us, then a much bigger question opens up. Not just did they have something like a soul, but where does that life go? What does God actually do in the end with the whole world he made? The seas, the skies, the creatures, all of it. That's where the text goes next. And it goes further than most people have ever been shown. So let's do what almost no one does with this question. Let's actually open the text, not one verse pulled out to win an argument, but the whole shape of what Scripture says. I'll tell you the book and the chapter every time, so you can go and see it for yourself. Start where we already were, the Psalms. Psalm 36 is a song about the reach of God's love, how His mercy climbs into the heavens, how His righteousness stands like mountains. And then, right in the middle of all that height and glory, comes this line: O Lord, you preserve man and beast, in the same breath, under the same care. The animals are not an afterthought God tolerates. The songwriter puts them inside the circle of what God keeps, what God saves. Hold on to that word, preserve, because the whole question turns on it. What does God do with the things He preserves? Now go to the prophets. Isaiah chapter 11. Isaiah is looking ahead, past his own broken century, to a healed world under God's chosen king. And listen to what he sees there. He sees a wolf living beside a lamb, a leopard lying down with a young goat, a calf and a young lion together, and a little child leading them unafraid. It's one of the most tender pictures in all of Scripture. And notice who fills it. Not clouds, not abstract light. Animals, creatures, the very kinds of lives we bury in the backyard and cry over. When Isaiah paints God's restored world, there are animals in it. Then walk forward into the New Testament to Paul, the letter to the Romans, chapter 8. Paul says the whole creation is groaning like a woman in labor, waiting. Waiting for what? Creation itself, he says, was subjected to decay, to death, to everything that breaks, but not forever. And then the whole question turns on. The creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and the glory of the children of God. Read that again in your heart, not replaced, not scrapped and forgotten, set free. The same creation that is groaning now is the creation that gets liberated then. Paul does not picture God throwing the world away and starting over from nothing. He pictures God reaching into the world that suffers, the world with animals in it, and healing it. And that is exactly the promise the very last book makes explicit. Revelation chapter 21. The one seated on the throne says 5 words that hold the whole Bible together. Behold, I make all things new, not all new things, as if the old is deleted and something unrelated appears. All things new. The old made new, the broken made whole, the lost made found. Do you feel the ground shifting under the question you came here with? Because the tidy version Humans have souls, animals just don't hope, cannot survive an honest walk through these pages. The Bible does not treat the animal world as disposable. It puts creatures in the songs of God's care, in the prophet's vision of the healed world, in Paul's promise of liberation, in the final word that makes all things new. Now, I have to be as careful on this side as I was on the other, because none of these verses is a receipt with your pet's name written on it. Isaiah is painting the whole created order at peace, not answering the specific ache of one empty collar. Paul is speaking of all creation, not making you a personal promise about the one who slept at the foot of your bed. That distance matters, and I won't pretend it away. That honesty is the whole reason you can trust the hope on the other side of it. But here's what the text has already done and cannot be taken back. It has moved the animals from outside God's future to inside it. And once they're inside the frame, the real question is no longer, do they matter to God? The text has answered that. The question is what that healed world actually holds and how close it might come to the one you're still missing. That's where almost no one dares to go next. We're going there. Here's where I have to earn your trust by telling you what the text does not say as plainly as I told you what it does, because this is the exact place where good, sincere people go off the road in both directions. Some grab the verses we just read and turn them into a guarantee. Your pet is in heaven right now, waiting by the gate. Others read the same silence and slam the door. The Bible never once promises it, so stop asking. Both are reaching past what's written. And you deserve better than someone's wish dressed up as scripture. So let me lay out, honestly, the three things the text leaves open. Because the open places are where real hope lives, not the false shut ones. The first open question is the one in Ecclesiastes we started with. Remember, the writer asked whether the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth, and he left it as a question. For centuries, careful readers have landed in different places on that verse. Some hear it as saying, the animal simply returns to dust, and that's all. Others hear the writer confessing the limit of what any human can see from down here. Who knows? Which is not a denial at all, but an admission that this is God's knowledge, not ours. I'm not going to force it to say more than it says, but notice, even the most sober reading only gets you to we don't know, never to definitely not. The honest floor under this question is mystery, not no. The second open place is that picture in Isaiah, the wolf and the lamb. I owe you full honesty here. Faithful interpreters have read that vision two ways for a very long time. Some take it literally, a real remade earth where real animals live in real peace. Others take it as poetry, a picture of former enemies among people reconciled under God's king, with the animals as the imagery, not the subject. I can't stand here and tell you which one is certainly right. The church has held both. But even the poetic reading doesn't erase the animals. It uses them because in the mind of Scripture, a world made right is a world where even the creatures are at peace. The image only works because animals belong in the picture of paradise. That instinct is in the text either way. And the third open place is the most personal, and I'll say it gently. Nowhere does Scripture write down the name of a specific animal and promise you'll see that specific one again. There is no verse that says the dog you raised, the cat that outlived your marriage, will be there. If anyone quotes you one, they're inventing it, and I won't do that to you. That particular promise, the one your heart most wants, the Bible leaves in God's hands, not ours. Now stay with me, because here is the implication almost no one draws out, and it's the one that changes everything. We keep asking whether there's a specific promise for our specific animal, but look at what we do have. We have a God who preserves man and beast. We have a creation that isn't discarded, but liberated. We have a final promise to make all things new. And all things is a bigger word than we let it be. We have a king whose healed world is pictured again and again, with living creatures inside it and at peace. So the question quietly turns around. It stops being, is there a rule that lets my pet in? And becomes, is there any reason in a world God has promised to make new and whole and free, to think he would leave out the very kind of life he called good on the day he made it, the kind of life he himself preserves? The text doesn't hand you a yes, but it removes every reason for a confident no. And in the space between the space Ecclesiastes guarded with who knows, there is room, not for wishful thinking, for grounded, God-shaped hope. That's the difference I promised you at the start. Wishful thinking says, of course, they're waiting for you because it can't bear the alternative. Grounded hope says something braver. I don't get to know the details, but I know the character of the one who does, and I've seen what he does with the things he loves and the world he calls good. And when you know his character, the last piece of this finally comes into the light. So come back with me to where we started. The name you still say without meaning to, the patch of sun on the floor, the quiet that was the loudest thing you ever heard. I told you at the beginning that I'd read this question in Scripture more carefully than I expected to, and that where the text pictures the world God promises to remake, it went further than I thought. Now you've seen it with your own eyes. Not a trick, not a verse bent to comfort you, a God who preserves man and beast, a creation that groans now but gets set free, not thrown away, a healed world with creatures in it, and over all of it, 5 words from the throne that hold the whole story together. Behold, I make all things new. Here's what I've come to believe that promise means for you tonight. The world God is remaking is not a thinner world than this one. It's a fuller one. Everything that death broke, he is in the business of restoring. And Scripture never once draws the border of that restoration to leave out the creatures he made and called good. When God says all things new, he is not handing us a smaller universe with the tender parts trimmed off. He is promising a world where nothing good is finally lost. And the love you had for them, the love you were once told was too much, that love was never the problem. It was practice. It was your heart learning the shape of a world where things are not lost forever. I can't tell you their name is written somewhere waiting for you. The Bible doesn't say that, and I won't pretend it does. But I can tell you this, and every page we opened tonight stands behind it. The God who makes all things new is not less tender than you are. The one who counted the sparrows, who preserves man and beast, who calls the healed creation his own. He does not love the world you're grieving less than you do. Whatever he does with the life you're missing, he does it as the God who restores, not the God who discards. And that is a place you can lay this ache down, not in a guarantee, in his character. If this spoke to something you've carried quietly, subscribe. There's fresh manna here every single day, and I'd love to keep walking through the hard, honest questions with you. And if you've read this far, it's probably because you've loved a creature like this yourself. I'm glad you're here, so let me leave you with the picture Isaiah couldn't stop looking at. A world with no more hurting and no more destroying. A wolf and a lamb side by side, afraid of nothing. A little child leading them, unafraid. Whatever else is uncertain, that much God has shown us plainly. The world he is making is a world at peace, down to the creatures. You don't have to be sure of every detail to trust the one who is. Rest in that tonight. Which one are you still missing? Tell me their name below. I'll read everyone. Scripture explained, faith applied, life changed. This was your daily manna. Come hungry tomorrow.